I still remember that Saturday afternoon like it was yesterday. The sun was setting over Phoenix, painting my apartment in golden light. I had a cold beer in my hand, a football game on the screen, and absolutely no idea that my entire life was about to change forever. When the doorbell rang, I thought it was the pizza I ordered. Instead, I found my sister Angela standing there with her 4-year-old son Mason, her eyes carrying something I could not quite name. Before we dive into this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. If this is your first time here, hit that like button and subscribe to join our community. What happened next changed my entire life, and I never saw it coming. Angela looked exhausted, but her makeup was heavy like she was getting ready for a night out. She was wearing a tight red dress and heels that seemed out of place for a casual Saturday visit. Mason stood beside her, clutching a worn-out teddy bear that had seen better days. His clothes were wrinkled, and his hair looked like it had not been cut in months. She pushed Mason gently toward me and said she needed me to watch him for just a few hours. Something urgent came up, she explained, and she would be back before dinner. I did not even get a chance to ask what was so urgent. She kissed Mason on the forehead, whispered something in his ear, and hurried back to her car. The last thing she said was that she promised to be back before dinner. I watched her drive away, feeling a strange unease settle in my stomach. Mason and I stood in the doorway for a moment. He looked up at me with big brown eyes that seemed far too serious for a 4-year-old. I tried to make conversation, asked him if he wanted to watch cartoons or play with some toys. He barely responded, just nodded and walked inside, still holding that ragged teddy bear like it was his lifeline. The hours passed slowly. I tried everything to get Mason to open up, but he remained quiet, almost withdrawn. He picked at the chicken nuggets I made him eat, a few bites of cereal, and asked me twice when his mommy was coming back. Each time I told him soon. Each time I believed it less. By 9 o'clock that night, Mason had fallen asleep on my couch, curled up with his teddy bear. I covered him with a blanket and checked my phone for the 100th time. Nothing from Angela. I called her again, straight to voicemail. I sent text after text, my messages growing increasingly worried. Then my phone buzzed with a text notification. It was from Angela. My heart sank as I read the words on the screen. She wrote that she was in Vegas, that she had met someone, and that she could not do this mom thing anymore. She said Mason was better off with me and told me not to try to find her. I read that message over and over, convinced I was misunderstanding something. My sister, the same woman who had complained about motherhood, but still posted smiling photos with Mason on social media, had just abandoned her child via text message. I called her immediately. The phone rang once, then went to voicemail. I called again. Same result. I sent messages begging her to explain, demanding she come back, pleading with her to think about what she was doing. Nothing. Complete silence. Around midnight, Mason woke up crying. He called out for his mommy, his small voice breaking in the darkness of my apartment. I rushed to his side, not knowing what to say or do. I held him as he sobbed, his little body shaking against mine. Between tears, he asked me if he had done something bad. He asked if that was why Mommy left. That question hit me harder than anything else. I told him no. Told him he was a good boy. Told him everything would be okay. I was not sure I believed my own words. We spent that night on the couch together, Mason eventually crying himself back to sleep while I stared at the ceiling. When morning came, I searched through the small bag Angela had left with Mason. Inside, I found 2 sets of worn clothes, a few cheap plastic toys, and Angela's wallet. The wallet contained exactly $23, a faded photo of Mason as a newborn, and nothing else. No identification for Mason. No health insurance card. No birth certificate. Nothing that would help me understand what to do next. That was when the reality hit me. Angela had not made a spontaneous decision. She had planned this. She had packed just enough to make it look temporary, left just enough money to ease her conscience, and disappeared into the Nevada desert with whoever this new man was. My sister had not just left her son. She had erased herself from his life. The first week was pure chaos. I called my boss on a Monday morning, stumbling through an explanation that sounded insane even to my own ears. My sister abandoned her kid with me over the weekend, and I do not know when she is coming back. To his credit, my supervisor was understanding, approving emergency family leave while I figured things out. But I could hear the disbelief in his voice, the same disbelief I felt every time I looked at Mason sitting quietly in my apartment. I knew nothing about taking care of a child. My refrigerator contained beer, leftover Chinese food, and some questionable lunch meat. My apartment was a bachelor pad in every sense of the word, with video game controllers on the coffee table, and no childproofing anywhere. Mason refused to eat anything except cereal and chicken nuggets, turning his nose up at everything else I tried to offer. I made 3 trips to the grocery store that first week, each time feeling more overwhelmed than the last. What worried me more than the food situation was Mason himself. He barely spoke. When he did talk, it was usually to ask about his mother, or to answer my questions with one-word responses. I noticed he flinched when I moved too quickly near him. He would not let go of that teddy bear even during bath time. Something was deeply wrong, and I was only beginning to understand how deep it went. I took Mason to a pediatrician that Thursday, paying out of pocket because I had no insurance information for him. The doctor, a kind woman in her 50s, examined him thoroughly. Her expression grew more serious as the appointment continued. She told me Mason was underweight for his age, showing signs of mild malnutrition. His language development was delayed, likely from lack of stimulation and interaction. There were no physical signs of abuse, but there were clear indicators of neglect. She asked me how long Mason had been in my care, and when I explained the situation, she nodded slowly, like pieces of a puzzle were falling into place. That same week, I contacted the police to report what had happened. They took my statement, opened a missing persons case for Angela, and connected me with Child Protective Services. A caseworker named Linda Torres came to my apartment to assess the situation. She was professional but compassionate, explaining the complicated legal territory I had stumbled into. Without legal guardianship, I had no authority to make medical decisions for Mason, enroll him in school, or even keep him long-term. If Angela could not be found, and no family member stepped forward with proper legal status, Mason might have to enter the foster care system. The thought of Mason being taken away, placed with strangers, possibly bounced from home to home, made my stomach turn. I told Linda I would do whatever it took to keep him with me. She gave me the name of a family law attorney and wished me luck. The look in her eyes told me I would need it. I hired attorney David Brennan the next day. He was expensive, but he came highly recommended for custody cases. He explained that I would need to petition for temporary guardianship, which required proving that Angela had abandoned Mason and that I was a suitable caregiver. The process could take months. In the meantime, Mason existed in a legal gray area, protected only by the fact that CPS had no immediate concerns about my care of him. The memories started coming out in fragments. One evening, while I was making dinner, Mason quietly told me that sometimes Mommy forgot to feed him. Another night, as I tucked him into the bed I had bought for him, he mentioned being scared when Mommy brought strange men home. He described being left alone in their apartment watching cartoons for hours while waiting for Angela to come back. Each revelation was a knife to my heart. My sister, my own blood, had been failing this child in ways I never imagined. I thought about all the signs I had missed over the years. Angela had always been unstable, moving from job to job, relationship to relationship. She complained constantly about how hard motherhood was, how it had ruined her life, how she never wanted kids in the first place. I had dismissed it as venting, never thinking she was capable of actually walking away. I had been wrong. 3 weeks after Angela disappeared, my phone rang with a Las Vegas area code. It was her. For a moment, my heart leaped with hope. Maybe she had come to her senses. Maybe she was coming back for Mason. Those hopes died the moment she opened her mouth. She did not ask about Mason. Not once in the first 5 minutes of the conversation did she mention her son. Instead, she talked about Derek, the love of her life, a man she had met at a casino who was going to change everything for her. She talked about starting fresh, about finally living her life, about being free. Then came the real reason for her call. She needed money. Derek had a business opportunity and she just needed a few $1,000s to invest. I asked her about Mason. She paused, seemingly annoyed by the interruption to her sales pitch. She said he was better off with me, that she was not cut out for motherhood, that some women just are not meant to be mothers. When I told her I was petitioning for guardianship, that she might lose her parental rights, she laughed. She actually laughed. Then her voice turned cold, and she said something I will never forget. She said she never wanted that kid anyway, that he was a mistake. The line went dead before I could respond. I sat in my kitchen for a long time after that call, staring at my phone in disbelief. My sister was gone. Not just physically, but emotionally, morally, completely gone. The Angela. I thought I knew the big sister who had looked out for me when we were kids, who had taught me to ride a bike and helped me with homework, that Angela no longer existed. Maybe she never did. During these dark weeks, small lights began to appear. My elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, noticed me struggling and offered to help watch Mason while I worked from home. She was a retired kindergarten teacher, and Mason warmed up to her quickly. Diana from my office started checking in regularly, bringing homemade meals, and asking about how we were doing. Her kindness stood out in contrast to my recent ex-girlfriend, who had broken up with me 2 weeks into the crisis, declaring she did not sign up for instant parenthood. I did not miss her. One evening, about 2 months in, Mason was playing with some building blocks Mrs. Patterson had given him. Without looking up, he said a single word that stopped me in my tracks. He called me uncle. It was the first time he had called me anything other than your name or you. Such a small thing, but it felt like the first real crack in the wall he had built around himself. 6 months passed. They were the hardest 6 months of my life, but also unexpectedly some of the most meaningful. Mason had transformed from the silent, withdrawn child Angela had left on my doorstep into a curious, sometimes chatty little boy who actually smiled. He had gained weight, started speaking in full sentences, and developed a passion for dinosaurs that meant our apartment was now filled with plastic prehistoric creatures. His preschool teachers remarked on his progress, telling me he was catching up quickly and making friends. My relationship with Diana had deepened into something real. She had been there through the court hearings, the sleepless nights, the moments when I doubted whether I could actually do this. She loved Mason genuinely, not as an obligation, but as a choice. When she first called him Buddy and he responded with a giggle, I knew she was special. The guardianship process was moving forward. David Brennan had filed all the necessary paperwork, and we were waiting for a court date. Angela had been served with papers but had not responded. Her continued absence actually worked in our favor, legally speaking. The court was inclined to grant me permanent guardianship, given the clear evidence of abandonment. Then Linda Torres called with news that shattered the fragile peace we had built. Angela had given birth to another baby, a little girl born in a hospital in Reno, Nevada. The baby had tested positive for methamphetamine at birth. Hospital staff had immediately contacted CPS, and the infant was taken into protective custody within hours of being born. Angela was arrested on charges of child endangerment and possession of a controlled substance. Derek, the man she had left everything for, had apparently abandoned her months earlier when her pregnancy became inconvenient. I hung up the phone and sat in silence for what felt like hours. Mason was at preschool. Diana was at work. I was alone with the weight of what I had just learned. My sister had not just abandoned one child. She had created another life, endangered that life from the very beginning, and lost her to the state before she could even leave the hospital. The spiral Angela was in had no bottom. A week later, I received a collect call from a detention facility in Nevada. It was Angela. Her voice was hoarse, broken, nothing like the defiant woman who had demanded money 6 months earlier. She cried throughout most of the call, barely coherent at times. She blamed Derek for getting her hooked on drugs. She blamed our absent father for never being there. She blamed our mother, who had been dead for 3 years, for working too much and loving too little. She blamed everyone and everything except herself. Near the end of the call, almost as an afterthought, she asked about Mason. "How is he, by the way?" she asked, like she was inquiring about a distant acquaintance rather than the child she had carried for 9 months. I told her he was thriving. I told her he was happy, healthy, and loved. I told her I was going to adopt him. She was quiet for a moment, then said that was probably for the best. She asked me to bail her out. She needed $5,000, and she promised she would get clean, get her life together, make things right. I had heard these promises before, not from Angela, but from our father, who had made similar vows every time he resurfaced in our lives before disappearing again. The pattern was genetic, apparently. I told Angela no. I told her I would not enable her anymore, that she needed to face the consequences of her choices, that maybe hitting rock bottom would finally wake her up. She screamed at me, called me names I will not repeat, and hung up. It was the last time I spoke to my sister for a very long time. David Brennan called me the following week with significant news. The situation with the new baby had triggered a comprehensive review of Angela's fitness as a parent. The state was moving to terminate her parental rights to Mason. Given her arrest, her drug use, and the immediate removal of her second child, the court had more than enough evidence. We would need to attend a hearing, but David was confident about the outcome. The hearing was held on a gray Tuesday morning. Angela appeared via video conference from the detention facility. She looked nothing like the sister I remembered from childhood. Her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow, her hair limp and unwashed. She wore an orange jumpsuit and spoke in a monotone when addressed by the judge. The proceedings were surprisingly brief. David presented our case documenting Mason's progress under my care, the evidence of prior neglect, and Angela's continued inability to provide a safe environment. A CPS representative testified about the circumstances of the new baby's birth and removal. The guardian ad litem assigned to represent Mason's interests recommended permanent placement with me. When the judge asked Angela if she wished to contest the termination of her parental rights, the courtroom fell silent. Angela stared at the camera for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. She said Mason was better off without her, that she would sign whatever was needed. No fight, no appeal, just surrender. The judge granted the termination. David squeezed my shoulder. Across the video screen, Angela's image disappeared as the connection was cut. And just like that, Mason was mine. Not my nephew, my son. The months following the hearing were a time of healing, not just for Mason, but for me. I had never planned to be a father. At 30 years old, I had imagined years more of bachelor freedom, of focusing on my career, of figuring out life at my own pace. Instead, I was researching kindergarten options, attending parent-teacher conferences, and learning to make dinosaur-shaped pancakes on Sunday mornings. The anger toward Angela came in waves. Some days I felt nothing but rage at her selfishness, her weakness, her willingness to throw away her own child. Other days, the anger faded into something sadder, a grief for the sister I had lost long before she drove away that Saturday evening. I started attending a support group for kinship caregivers, people who had stepped up to raise family members' children. Hearing their stories helped me realize I was not alone, and that complicated feelings were part of the process. In those meetings, I began to understand Angela in a way I had resisted before. Our childhood had not been easy. Our father left when I was 7 and Angela was 11, disappearing into a cycle of addiction and broken promises that continued until his death in a drunk driving accident when I was 22. Our mother worked 2 jobs to keep us fed and housed, which meant Angela often took care of me, taking on responsibilities no child should have to bear. She never got to be young. She never got to be carefree. And when she finally had a chance at her own life, she chose paths that led nowhere good. None of this excused what she did to Mason. Nothing could excuse that. But understanding the roots of her brokenness helped me release the poison of resentment that was building in my heart. I could not change Angela. I could not save her from herself. But I could choose not to let hatred define my relationship with her memory. One night, about a year after the abandonment, Mason asked me about his first mommy. He was lying in bed, his dinosaur nightlight casting green shadows on the wall, his voice small and curious. I had been dreading this question, rehearsing answers in my head for months. I told him that his first mommy loved him very much, but she had problems that made it hard for her to take care of him the way he deserved. I told him that she asked me to be his dad because she knew I would love him and keep him safe. I kept it simple. I kept it gentle. I told him we could talk about it more when he was older, and that no matter what he was wanted and cherished. Mason thought about this for a moment. Then he looked at me with those brown eyes that had once seemed so haunted and said he was glad I was his dad now. He hugged me, rolled over, and fell asleep. Within minutes, his worries apparently settled for the time being. I sat on the edge of his bed for a long while, tears streaming silently down my face. Diana and I got married the following spring in a small ceremony in Mrs. Patterson's backyard. Mason was the ring bearer walking down the aisle with exaggerated seriousness, his tiny suit slightly too big. Mrs. Patterson sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. It was not the wedding I had once imagined, but it was perfect. It was family. Today, Mason is 6 years old. He starts first grade next month, and he is both terrified and excited. He still loves dinosaurs, though superheroes have become a close second. He calls Diana Mom and has started asking about getting a dog. He is a happy, healthy, normal little boy with no memory of sleeping in a cold apartment waiting for his mother to come home. Sometimes I think about that Saturday afternoon when the doorbell rang. I think about how easily I could have said no, could have insisted Angela find someone else, could have prioritized my own comfort over a child I barely knew. I think about the pizza I never ate, the football game I never finished, the life I never lived. And I realize that everything I lost was nothing compared to what I gained. That doorbell did not just bring me a nephew, it brought me my son. If you have made it this far, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to step up for family in an unexpected way? Have you faced a situation where someone you loved disappointed you beyond what you thought possible? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who is going through something similar. If this story touched you, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for being part of this community. May you find the strength to answer whatever unexpected doors life opens for you.